and welcome to Modinomics 3.0, our special series ahead of Budget 2024-25. Today, our focus is on the tax measures that could be announced on the 23rd of July. Given that this is the first union budget post the Lok Sabha elections, there are many who are hoping for some relief as far as easing the burden on taxpayers is concerned. Let's see what some of these measures could well be.
Honorable Speaker, I present...
Middle-class expectations were high as Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman began an interim budget speech. With general elections just a couple of months away, taxpayers are hoping for relief from the Modi government.
I do not propose to make any changes relating to taxation and propose to retain the same tax rates for direct and indirect taxes, including import duties.
Expectations are high again as this Halwa ceremony in North Block sends top Finance Ministry officials into seclusion just ahead of the budget speech, with the Finance Minister already having hinted at tax SOPs in the upcoming budget. Taxpayers are hoping for a sweeter serving this time around. Topping the wish list for the new tax regime are increase in basic income tax exemption limit to 5 lakh rupees, raising the threshold of the highest 30% tax slab to 25 or 30 lakh rupees, and an increase in the standard deduction from the current 50,000 rupees. Analysts are also hoping for some tweaks in the old tax regime. Other than the increase in the standard deduction and an increase in the basic exemption limit, a hike in the exemptions under Section 80C will also free up more money for the taxpayers. The healthcare sector will also receive a boost if exemptions under Section 80D are raised. The wish list also includes hiking the HR exemption in two-tier cities to 50% from 40%.
Taxes have increased on them. School fees, college fees has gone up, rental has gone up. Their income has not grown the same pace. Inflation has been high. The quality of life has improved, but not so much as they wanted. And they're paying more taxes. If you look at the tax slab, you're paying more tax in real term because of inflation. In the last 10 years, inflation is about 75-80%. But tax slab has not improved. So they must improve the tax slab.
Speculation is also rife over the possibility of changes in capital gains taxes to discourage FNOs trading by retail investors. The budget wish list is strengthened by the fact that government is flush with funds from the bumper dividend received from RBI and record GST and direct tax collections in the past few months. In his meeting with top economists last week, Prime Minister had received several suggestions on the tax front. The big message was to provide a tax relief to the Aam Aadmi, which apart from boosting private consumption, will also fortify the NDA government for the upcoming elections in Maharashtra, Haryana and Jharkhand. Bureau Report, Business Today Television.
So the big question there, will Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman bite the bullet on income tax changes? For more answers on that very critical question, I'm joined by renowned experts from the field. Mukesh Bhutani, Managing Partner at BMR Legal; Gokul Chaudhary, Tax Leader at Deloitte India; and Sameer Gupta, National Tax Leader at EY India. Thank you very much for joining us today. Mukesh, I want to come to you. There was expectation, anticipation, and perhaps some rationale behind demands that came up before the interim budget that the government, considering the level of inflation and the overall price rise that we have seen, should provide some sort of tax SOPs for the salaried, for the individual taxpayer. That did not happen. Do you think now is the time that the government may actually choose to do so?
Well, one is the question of speculation. Second is a simple economic theory. Yes, as you correctly pointed out, a combination of inflation should prompt the finance minister to announce proposals that will benefit the lower income category. And when I say lower income, means people who are on the cusp of threshold or they are just above the threshold. The second is, again, the simple economic theory that you need to have more income at the disposal of the taxpayers so that the taxpayers are able to spend more money. And the third is the simplified system the simplified system means taking away all exemptions and then giving the ability to spend more amount of money. So combination of these three reasons, I guess, will prompt her to carry out the proposals.
Okay. Gokul Chaudhary, if that were to be so, and if you agree with Mukesh that there is a possibility, what could those measures be? Break it up for us. What should we expect?
Well, I think in addition to what Mukesh spoke about quite rightly, I think there's also an underpinning of the tax buoyancy which is coming through with the finance minister, which means that the government's tax collections over the last year have been quite robust. And therefore, a number of reforms that took place in the previous years are showing results which are enabling the fiscal space for the government to be able to be more considerate towards the taxpayer community. Now, answering your question as to what the finance minister could do is incentivize the shift to the new personal tax regime. And that could be done by two ways. A, increase the amount of standard deduction that's available, which will enable some of the salary classes to get not 50,000, but maybe ₹1 lakh of standard deduction, or move the slab rates slightly higher. Currently, the slab rates move in a sequence of 3 lakhs each. The question is, will the finance minister enable some flexibility to move closer to 5 lakhs than 3 lakhs?
Okay. Samir, in 2019, we saw a very major move meant to boost manufacturing and private sector capital expenditure, which was changes in the corporate income tax. We haven't seen anything happen on income tax, and it's clear, like the previous speaker, that the government would rather move towards a no exemption new tax regime. Is that the way that we should continue to see the government's policy choice as far as tax rates are concerned, or do you personally believe something else is in offing?
The direction of travel is clear. I think they really want people to move to the new concessional regime. And I think it's whether you look at the corporate tax regime or the personal tax regime, right? Even in corporate tax, they've been taking away the deductions and they've been trying to come to a very moderate tax outcome at, an all-inclusive 25% and new manufacturing is 17%. So similarly, in personal income tax also, I think the direction of travel is clear, that they want people to adopt the concessional tax regime. But like I think what Mukesh and Gokul both said is that it needs to be a little bit more attractive. Where it is right now, it's not yet attractive enough for the switch over from where people are getting, HRA allowances, where they're getting, interest on housing loan deductions. The concessional tax regime still doesn't have some of those, very pertinent things which individuals look for. So the only way to do that is, as Gokul was saying, we need to obviously up the exemption limits and put more money to work in the hands of the individuals. So they'll probably have to work with both increasing the exemption limit and increasing the width of the slabs that are there today.
Mukesh, this is a question that a lot of lay people have asked, which is that why is there a differential between the peak corporate tax rate and the income tax rate? Forever we had the same 30%, that became 25 and 30 as far as personal income tax is concerned, and that's been so since 2019. Is this an aberration, or is there some greater design in the minds of tax policy makers behind this?
There are a combination of reasons for that. The 30% magical tax rate evolved in Mr. Chidambaram's dream budget of 1997. The guiding philosophy in those days was the Kelkar Committee report, which said that no matter what is the form of business, there should be consistent tax rate. Obviously, things have changed in India and things have changed globally as well, where globally there has been a race for lowering the corporate tax rate. And some of the countries have been saying that the maximum marginal rate applicable to individuals or non-corporate forms of taxpayers should be pegged at the higher rate. So you will have UK say 45%, you have some countries in continental Europe above 50%. Now, the drive to raise the direct tax, individual tax rates is more a Western phenomena, but we've also seen a steady increase in our effective rate. So though our basic rate has remained 30%, if you add the 4 or 5 layers of surcharge you have, we hit 42.5% for individual tax rates, which came down marginally to 39%. Now, the debate is whether a corporate tax rate of 30%, 20%, 15%, 30% being the basic rate, 25% being for manufacturing and the other 15 being for, what does that do to our rate system? Well, it makes it complex. It makes it a bit uncertain. There is a lot of virtue and wisdom in going back to the committee's reports and saying there should be consistent rates of tax. However, the economic theory that you should tax, people with high income more has prevailed over tax policy, and as a result of which you tend to have what we call it as the graded rate of taxation. But that applies only to individuals. That applies to non-corporate forms of businesses. As far as corporate businesses are concerned, there should be a consistent rate of tax. Now, the question that begs for an answer is that should we have 3 slabs of corporate tax, or should we have 2 slabs, one being concessional in order to encourage manufacturing in the country? I think the debate settles that there should be one consistent rate of corporate tax. Also, I think the world has moved away from the consistent rate of tax between corporates and individuals. So there is justification for individuals to be taxed at a higher rate. Now, you can sit and debate whether for a country like India, we should have a maximum marginal rate with surcharges at 40%. Personally, I feel it's very high. It discourages compliances, and hence our individual tax rates are a bit uncompetitive. Our corporate tax rates are competitive for manufacturing businesses. For non-manufacturing businesses, the distinction was taken away, but I think we can still do a more of concession on the corporate tax side of that.
Gokul, did the government achieve its objective when it decided to reduce the corporate tax rate in 2019, almost 5 years since then? And even though we've seen COVID and the related disruption, there's been a massive bounce back. Did the government achieve the objectives that it had set out for when it decided to go in for that tax cut?
Well, I think the government brought in the 15% corporate tax rate to incentivize new manufacturing. And I think at the point of time when it did it, it was certainly a rather strong move to try and be competitive with the rest of Southeast Asia, where manufacturing had been incentivized over decades. So therefore, the government was trying to make sure that it is competitive on a global scale to drive manufacturing into India, which was also at that point of time a China plus one strategy that was being followed, which we all know about. Has India succeeded? The answer is partially, because the 2019 announcement was followed by the unknown pandemic, which caused disruption for 3 years and therefore caused a number of business planning and, of course, to go into a bit of a delayed mode. But if you look at the number of businesses that have moved into India as opposed to rest of Asia Pacific, the answer is that India has done quite well in being able to attract investment into it. How much of it is because of the lower rate, was the lower rate just symbolic? I would say that it was more than symbolic. It did have an impact, but ideally, it would have been better if the corporate tax exemption had been extended by the 3 years, which had been lost during the period of the pandemic.
Samir Gupta, would you also support that demand for an extension due to the COVID era disruption?
No, I do think so. I mean, look, while we don't want to go to a race to the bottom in terms of, tax rates, 15% plus is also what everybody talks about as a global minimum tax. If you look at any of the publications which are coming out from the OECD. So I think from that perspective, it's a very sensible rate. I do see that, COVID did get people to lose time from a gestation point of view. Commercial production, especially when you move supply chains, is at least a 2 or a 2.5 year journey. So to get people to accept and to then go live in a complex country like India is never easy. So from that perspective, the extension is definitely something which should be considered favorably by a couple of years from where we are sitting right now. I do see that should be something that should be taken up by the government.
Okay, at least a couple of years extension. That's what Samir is saying. We'll slip into a very short break. Do stay with us as we continue the focus on what could happen as far as taxes are concerned in the budget.
PhonePe proudly presents Share.Market. Open a Demat account by 31st July and get zero brokerage till 31st December on F&O and intraday, equity delivery, wealth baskets, and zero account opening fees. Download Share.Market and start investing. Investments in the securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.
Do you know what it feels like to have everything at your fingertips?
Yes, boss. I do.
The XUV 700, fully loaded AX7 at a celebratory price of rupees 19.49 lakh.
Hey, careful, huh? My daddy got it from abroad. Hey, disaster! How will you pay for the loss now?
In stock market, you should take risk as per your capacity and knowledge. Trade in options very carefully.
Wow, Dikra! Absolutely perfect. Take risk with full understanding.
So much good. Investify.
Where the software engineer meets the talented photographer to create the big dream. The world comes together at Sharda University.
Take me to the base.
Sir, how was the test drive?
Badass. New Seltos. Tech is now badass.
Kia. Movement that inspires.
Welcome back. I'm discussing tax changes that are likely in the budget. Mukesh, I'm coming to you, and I want to turn the focus on the key point that a lot of people say, and we've seen that reflect in the Lok Sabha election and in our politics, which is the demand for those who are super rich, those who are extremely wealthy, to pay more. Now, I don't know what form this debate will actually take, because these are just demands, but is there tax logic in saying that in a country like India, where the welfare state is only increasing, those who are extremely well off, those who have, those who are super wealthy, they should be paying a little bit more?
I have read a lot of research on billionaire tax. I have read a lot of edits. Personally, I don't agree with that at all, particularly for a country like India. I think we will cause erosion in our entrepreneurial thinking. We will cause a dent in our entrepreneurial spirit if we embark on that path. So my views could be biased, but I don't think taxing the rich or looking at new forms of taxation, wealth tax or inheritance tax, is in my view a sensible policy for India to pursue at this stage of its development. Yes, when we become a middle-level country, when our per capita income is between $10,000 to $12,000, you can think of taxing few hundred billionaires. By the way, none of us are billionaires over here, so none of us have vested interest over here. But we serve billionaires. We serve clients who are not just billionaires, but we serve people who are millionaires and have the potential to become billionaires. You're going to tell them, these millionaires, that India is going to have a billionaire tax, they're going to run away from the country. So I am vehemently opposing any form of such move. It is fine to read research reports on billionaire tax. It is fine to read editorials in international newspaper, but I don't think that that's a sensible policy move for India.
But how do you then address, Mukesh, the growing inequity and the problems that it seems to be leading to in our society?
You know, that's a real challenge for any country in the world, which is the divide between the have and the have-nots. Post-COVID, the richest nations in the world, including United States, have been seen that divide widening. And it is a big social issue. It can lead to civil unrest situation, which we have seen in many parts of the world. But the question that needs to be asked is taxation an avenue? Is taxation an instrumentality to be able to address that social evil? Perhaps yes, in a Western country, but not in India. India is a country where entrepreneurship runs in our DNA. It's a country that's growing. It's a country that's aspiring to be a $30 trillion, $50 trillion economy. And I think that if we start with these policy moves, it is going to be a challenge for a country like India.
Gokul, a lot of people say that the government wants to get individual salaried taxpayers to move to the new regime. What will happen to the housing sector? One of the reasons, and this may not apply to luxury housing, but at least for a certain price point of a house, there is a benefit that you get if you take a home loan, and that has encouraged house ownership in the country. Is the new tax regime going to be a problem as far as housing sector growth is concerned in India?
So I think the important part that here is the aspiration of India as it's growing to actually own a house. And I think this decision making on whether to own a house or not, I think is driven more than just a tax incentive decision. And of course, in this decision comes a number of variables. One, of course, is the tax deduction, but more importantly, it is about where and you can get access to credit and at what rate you can get access to credit. And I think the government is going to be very clear in trying to make sure that it can keep the interest regime in a manner which incentivizes people to continue to borrow for housing sector. So that's one part of it. I think the other part which is driving here is that the government will continue to provide incentive for the construction industry. It will continue to provide incentive for the infrastructure sector, both of which have an important role in determining how the prices of housing in this country happens, including the ability to be able to grow bigger projects on the outskirts of large cities. So I think real estate rationalization of the laws, some reforms in that sector will be extremely important to make sure that accessibility to housing, accessibility to credit increases, and that the decision in relation to tax deduction is not as predominant as it is seen today.
Samir, the discussion around direct taxes is related to the budget. What is not part of the budget is indirect taxes, where a lot of people say that indirect taxes are also now a significant burden because indirect taxes are regressive. A poor man pays the same tax rate on a packet of biscuits or chips that a billionaire could hypothetically pay. And that is why tax policy was always all about direct taxes being linked to income and indirect taxes being moderate. That is a discussion for the GST Council to take. But given that context, do you think there is anything more that our direct tax changes in the budget should be addressing? Samir Gupta, that question is for you.
So I think that, from a directional point of view, again, like you rightly said, GST is not the mandate that you will be able to look at from a budget point of view, because that the council will decide. And there has been a long-standing discussion to see how to, bring the rates more calibrated across just three levels. You have a normal merit and a demerit rate, and therefore, get the GST rates effectively more palpable for a lot of the items which are the consumption items. So you will still have a sin tax on vehicles and large cars, etc. But that can be a demerit rate. But for the most part, I think it is important that the exercise that they had already started does get those results, because there will be a continuous clamor from every particular industry to ask for a rate rationalization, and that's not something which augurs very well if it is left open. So I think there is a work that is cut out over there. I think from a direct tax point of view, I think what has worked really well over the last several years is just stability in the rates. There has been no real increase in any rate pretty much from 2019. And I think that's the journey that the government should definitely continue on. We may see something coming up potentially in capital gains. But again, it's something which is a very sensitive subject. So whether they do it in this budget or they set up a committee to look at the entire capital gains landscape, I think that's anybody's guess at this stage.
Mukesh, I want to come to you on that because there have been comments by noted and influential international experts like Chris Wood, who said that India should have no capital gains tax and the government should actually be encouraging long-term investments in the market. Where do you stand on the subject of reforming or tweaking or changing our capital gains taxation structure?
See, as it is widely speculated, the change in capital gains structure is largely motivated by the activity that's happening in the markets, the amount of money that people make in the markets. So, one thing is to say that most nations do not tax capital gains tax. And hence India should not tax capital gains tax. Up until 2018, we were not taxing capital gains tax. And our threshold for long-term capital gains, at least on securities, is at 12 months. And hence till 2018, we were not taxing it. 2018 was the first year we started, and then we saw a increase in the rate of tax for short-term capital gains tax as well. I think the point that Samir made is important, which is the certainty part. And I think his attention is more focused on what do institutions believe in. It's not about how much money individuals are making. It's about the strength of the capital markets, which is dependent on a fair bit of institutional investments that's coming from outside India. They look out for certainty and clarity. So I think it would be a knee-jerk reaction to look at tampering the capital gains tax rate. Instead, there should be a well-thought-through long-term game plan. And the idea of setting up a committee and getting stakeholders involved and stakeholders consulted upon would, in my view, be a better way to move forward. Much as we may all try and think rationally.
Absolutely. No shocks. Continue to remain on a path of stability and don't surprise the markets or any other stakeholders. That will be key to watch out for, along with any potential changes that happen on the income tax front. But I've completely run out of time on the show. I thank all my guests on the show. We'll be back with continuing coverage on other shows. Until then, goodbye.